What's the most X-Files-like experience you've had in real life? When I was 19 and my best friend was 20, we are nearly 40 now, we were driving back to my house after visiting someone at work. We were on a somewhat busy road. It was getting dark but wasn't quite dark yet. There were street lights and business lights everywhere, so visibility was still great. This road was 3 lanes in each direction and there was a concrete median dividing the traffic. I was in the left lane next to the median, and a traffic light was coming up. I saw a man standing in the median a good way before where the crosswalk for the light would be. It instantly made me nervous. As soon as I thought that, he stepped out to cross the street. My best friend and I both instantly braced for impact as I slammed on my brakes. We went through him. We didn't hit him, and because there was a car to my right I wasn't able to swerve out of my lane to avoid hitting the man. I looked in my rear view and there wasn't anyone there. I had come to a complete stop and we physically turned around in our seats to see how he had jumped out of the way. There was no one there and no way he could have ran off or hidden anywhere that fast. We both turned to each other and almost in sync asked each other, "Did you see that man?" We both saw the same thing. A man. Couldn't describe his face, but it was a man's form, and both of us remember being confused as to why he was wearing a white robe, and both being terrified that he stepped out in front of us, like he was committing suicide. I had a baby in the back seat. She was about 3 months old. She had been crying during the drive and went silent when we came to a screeching stop, which added to the weirdness of it all. We still bring it up occasionally and neither of us can come up with an explanation for what we saw other than something supernatural. Also, we both saw the white cloth fling across the windshield, like he was hitting it, but there was no impact, nothing. It was like he went through the car. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but there's a ghost in that baby now. Every few weeks my girlfriend or I will see STCH sight of colorful lights moving past our 3rd story apartment window at night. I, the Scully of the relationship, am convinced it is some trick of the light, with a police car's flashing lights reflecting off of something and bouncing back to our window. My girlfriend is certain that someone is flying a drone past our window to spy on us. I always run out to check as soon as I see the lights, but I never see a drone. The lights look like a drone, but they move too fast and they move through tree branches, so I don't think it's a drone. It's probably aliens though. Get some drinks and have a night with her, looking out the window, and drink every night until you see it. This one scarred me for a couple of months. When I was in high school, a guy and I got into an argument. He socked me in the jaw and started to fall to the floor. When I hit the floor, I instantly transported to a dinner table at which I was an adult. There was a woman sitting across from me, with a toddler boy and a preteen girl. I got a good look of my surroundings, a relatively modern house, with what looked like 2 floors. I felt like I belonged here, like I had some sort of emotional connection with all the people in the room, especially the kids. Then, the woman, my wife, asked me a question. When I opened my mouth, I threw up all over the table and woke up in a stretcher in an ambulance. Hours later, I found out I just had a minor concussion. For a while, I felt like I left a part of my life behind, even if it was only for a bleak moment in that world. To this day, I can still clearly remember all their faces and what the house looked like. Man actually hit you so hard you were knocked into the future. 6 years ago, I was hanging out with my siblings in our yard during a clear, sunny day around high noon, and I suddenly caught something moving in the sky out of the corner of my eye. When I turned to get a better look, I couldn't reconcile what the frick I was seeing. It was a metal cube just gliding through the air pretty high up. I proceeded to absolutely lose my crap and my sibs saw it as well before it disappeared behind some trees. We ran to the other side of the trees but it was already gone. Still creeps me out to think about. We did live right next to a military base, so make of that what you will. Thing had all the aerodynamics of a literal brick though. It hung in the air in precisely the way that bricks don't, is what you're saying. Sounds like part of a Vaughan constructor fleet to me. I driving down the highway about 3 AM when a semi-truck pulled alongside me then swerved into my lane running me off the road and down a very steep incline. I remember going over, I gunned the engine, why I don't know, but as I was going downhill I kept telling myself to step on the brake. I couldn't move, it was like someone was holding my foot down. Then I heard this voice tell me, okay, now you can step on the brake. Neither my infant daughter nor myself were injured, and the only damage to the car was a hole in the oil pan. Both the tow truck and the highway patrol officer was incredulous that I didn't roll the car. They told me if I had tried to stop any sooner than I did, I would have probably killed us both. It's like a vocal form of dad reflexes. I was digging a grave for a passed on pet in the woods behind my house. I leaned on my shovel to stop for a break. I saw some kind of animal dart in front of me and leaned forward to look at it closely. It had vanished. Next thing I knew, I woke up lying on the ground and for some reason didn't worry about it. I just got up and began digging again. It was a hot summer in the mountains, so when I got weak and exhausted a little later, I figured I was getting heat exhaustion. So I went back to my mom's house to cool off. She freaked out because I was covered in blood. I had a big skip mark cut on the very top of my scalp, like something very sharp had skipped across my head like a skipping stone. It was in the middle of a property that backs to a big multi-county lake a mile or two back, and on other sides was just dense forest my family owned. No idea what it was. I was 11 when this happened. Maybe around 2006-7? My money is you got hit by a stray bullet that skimmed your scalp, or something like that. I was driving back from a 16-hour road trip to see family and I was about an hour from home. The whole trip was just 4 days long, so I was pretty sleep deprived and had been driving by myself with very few stops. I was cruising on the highway and in front of me was a tunnel through the mountains. I hadn't driven through a tunnel on the way out of the state, so I became alarmed I had been driving the wrong way. I checked my GPS but had no signal on my phone. Unusual. The whole trip I normally have signal. I immediately took the exit before the tunnel to get my bearings. It was a big circle exit and at the end was a 4-way stop with a flashing traffic light. I took a left and the only thing around was a small 50s style diner and a parking lot. All the lights were off in the diner, obviously closed, but the parking lot was full of cars, like, packed. There were old classic cars and new cars, but there was not a single soul to be seen. It was around 3 AM, so I didn't expect a crowd, but there wasn't a hotel or homes nearby, just a closed diner and parking lot full of cars. I didn't even slow down. I freaking noped out of there so hard, pulled a UEY in the street and drove back to the on-ramp to the highway. Once I was back on the highway, I drove for about 30 minutes until the GPS came back. I was actually pretty close to home. My friend and I once drove back to try and find the diner, but we never could find it, or the tunnel. I like to think that if I would have pulled into the parking lot, my car might have been added to the collection and no one would have seen me again. Wise choice. Probably nothing supernatural, but also probably something very illegal. In my hometown area there is a ghost story about a large grey bull that roams the local farms and bellows when seen, only to vanish into thin air. When I was a boy in the Scouts, I heard that story at a meeting and it made my blood run cold and gave a distinct taste of salt in my mouth. One of my earlier memories was being in the bottom of our fields at home and walking back uphill towards our house. I looked up and in front of me was a gigantic greyish blue bull standing between me and the house. I had never seen it before and we didn't have cows, so when it bellowed I turned tail and ran down through the field. When I looked back behind me, in a wide open field with nowhere to go, it was gone. My grandmother didn't believe me, of course, but years later she was our den mother, and when that story was being told I looked up at her across the room and she was already looking at me and white as a ghost. That's freaking awesome. Growing up, my brother beat the crap out of me constantly, like cut eyes, bloody noses, police called beatings. One day at the library I was reading a book about some tribe who believed you could go into people's dreams and cast a sickness on them. So I did all the pre-dream groundwork described in the book, and that night I went to sleep and had a dream. In the dream I was at one end of a long road and my brother was at the other end. I lifted my hand and pointed at him. I cast a sickness on you. The next day we're watching TV and he said, I feel like crap. You have mono. I don't even know why I thought of that, but it was the first thing that came to mind. Frick you be was all he said and the conversation was over. A week later it turns out he did have mono. I was freaked out. I was pretty sure I was a witch and would burn in heck. To compound matters, I had a friend whose dad was a professor. We'd get stoned with him and he'd always tell me random facts. I'm at his house and he starts telling me about this tribe that went in people's dreams and cast sickness. I was paranoid as frick that people would learn this horrible thing I did. Now that I'm not 15 and an idiot, I assume it was just the creepiest coincidence ever. From what you've told me, your brother deserved it. I have a friend who once told me about a time when he was in his teens. He slept in a bunk bed with his brother in the lower bunk. He said he dreamt a demon wearing the skin of a man threatened to kill his brother. In order to save him, he somehow managed to procure a knife and put the knife to the neck of the demon. The demon tells him, the only way to rid evil is through evil. He hesitated and woke up to find he was pressing a butcher knife under the neck of his younger brother. He was still sleeping, fortunately, but when he awoke, he told the same dream exactly, except he was attacked by his brother in the dream and said the exact same thing. The only way to rid evil is through evil. Nothing similar happened after that and it gave him some serious issues that led him to go through psychotherapy for a while. I can't say if it's true or not. As far as I know he made the whole thing up, but I don't think so as he was reluctant to mention it. I had to share a room with my younger brother growing up. I woke up one night and see him sitting up in bed across the room mumbling, "I have to kill it. I have to stab it," over and over. Threw a pillow at him to wake him up and went back to sleep. Driving south down a back road parallel to a bunch of farm fields that end about 3 or 4 miles at a heavy pine tree line and the road curves hard to the left, east. It was about 8 PM when I was on my way home from work, so the sun was setting to my right, west. I was probably listening to music, just zoning out waiting to get home, when just past the tree line I saw this smallish orange ball of light rise up from behind the trees pretty slowly and came to a hover about 1 or 2 finger thicknesses above the treetops from where I was. Instantly I'm thinking this isn't the sun, because when I looked to my right the sun was setting. Now my eyes are freaking glued to this thing, and the whole time I'm hoping my car isn't going to mysteriously shut down either. But while I'm thinking that, this orange ball is getting bigger and turning yellow while another smaller ball of orange light starts rising up next to the first one, and the second begins to get bigger and turn yellow as well. I can't freaking believe what I'm seeing and don't think anyone else will either, all the while trying to make sense of it. These 2 yellow balls of what I assume are light are now hovering above the tree line that I'm heading reluctantly toward, but once the second had matched the first in shape, size and hovering height, they both just seemed to move south as they got smaller and smaller until I couldn't see them past the horizon. There was no sound that I could hear from them either, military, VTOL or otherwise. I still really want to know what it is. I personally think it was something hovering up to takeoff level. Being in a forest, that's really the only way. And the color plus size change was the engines warming up before they finally left. TLDR. Driving at sunset and saw 2 extra balls of light. Punctuation. When I was 12 I spent the night at a friend's house. We were up late chatting, falling asleep, listening to some music, Hotel California, and suddenly the music stopped. A bright blue light shined into the bedroom window, lit the room up, then dissipated. Hotel California resumed like nothing happened. We were frozen, dumbfounded, and freaked out, getting lots of chills and feeling weird. Did you see that? I reluctantly got out of bed to peek outside. Nothing there but an empty parking lot by a wooded area. I looked at the clock. It said 2:14. For the next couple years it became somewhat of an urban legend among my friends. We'd stay up until 2:14 at each other's house and dare something to happen like that again. Lots of fun, scaring ourselves, but nothing happened. It just became known as 214 and we'd joke about it whenever we saw that it was 2:14. 2 years later I was at a different friend's house, up late, watching movies in the living room. Hot dog the movie. It was over, and we shut off the TV and were just chatting like normal, falling asleep. Suddenly, a bright white light shined into the living room window, lighting up the place, then dissipating, just like the blue light from 2 years before. I immediately was struck with fear. Did you see that? My friend replied. Yeah, I was filled with dread as I turned over to get a view of the VCR to see what time it was. My body covered in chills with anticipation. It was 2:14. My whole body was covered with shivers, my eyes watering, just freaking out. I already knew I didn't need to get up to look out the window. My friend's backyard is just all woods. Nothing could be back there. Suffice to say, with 2 different witnesses to go along with myself, 214 was a confirmed real thing in my life and I've been haunted by it ever since. Nothing like it has happened since, but it sure did color my adolescence and make me intrigued and fascinated by all things paranormal, unexplainable, weird, fantastic, etc. It was no surprise I became a huge X-Files fan. I have a friend who has this weird thing with 1234. I know it's not 214 and there was no blue light around the time, but he always looks at the clock at 1234. I think it's funny. Anytime I see 1234 on the clock I think, hey David. I swear I had an abduction-like experience. I went to bed just like normal and I had what could only be rationally explained as a really lucid dream that I awoke to a darkened room with a light above me. I was in a medical chair and what made me wake up was an extreme pinching pain around my cervix. I was comforted by a human female who held my hand and told me to go back to sleep. It felt like I was given a sedative and everything went dark and I don't remember waking up that night, only that I became aware that I was staring at my ceiling and I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis. And when I was able to move I rolled over. I was still scared at that point but I managed to go back to sleep and never told a soul. It wasn't weird until I went to my next gyno appointment a month later when I was told I had abnormal scarring on my cervix that wasn't there before, so it always made me question if my experience was real. I have a hard time talking about it for fear of being thought of as crazy. Wow, that's crazy, man. I walked the 2 miles home from my closing shift at Taco Bell. The whole time I felt uneasy. When I get home I have a brief moment of relief as I shut and lock the door. I still lived with my folks back then in their split foyer house. The basement on the front of the house was half underground, while the back is not. So at the entryway I turn on the basement light for a second to make sure the floor is clear of my brother's toys. After confirming it was, I turned off the light and walked down the stairs. Sometimes you get that sensation in the corner of your eye that something's there, and before you realize what's going on, you're staring something outside the window. I only saw glowing red eyes, staring back at me. I was frozen. It had to have been over 7 feet tall. Then I bolted into my room, got under the covers and stayed there for a few minutes hoping I was just imagining it. Then the back porch door opened, and my dog, who was kenneled right next to the inside door to that same porch, starts going apeshit. Thank God for that, I thought, as I heard the porch door open and close again. TLDR. When I was a kid, a monster almost got me, but my dog chased it off. 5 friends and I were playing flashlight tag hide and seek in his huge farm across the pond. He has nothing but forest. We're all playing, and 2 of us, my friend and I, have these sweet walkie-talkies. Both of us, plus another, were afraid to go into the forest, but the 3 of us decided to go, and since we could hide forever in there, we go in and split up, me by myself and the 2 others together with the walkie-talkies. We were talking for maybe 30 minutes back and forth, pretty stoked about our hiding spots. I even went up a tree and bit and found the perfect little nook to just chill in. About another 20 minutes goes by and I haven't heard from them. I walkie in, and nothing. Okay, maybe he didn't hear it. I walkie again. This time, I get a beep back. It stayed live for about 5 seconds. Are these things working? I tried again, and this time, I heard a distinct breathing. Alright, well, they have to be messing with me. Even so, it was freaking me out. I hop out of the tree and start heading back towards the house. As soon as I get down, I start hearing a howling. I thought it was coyotes, but there was something off about it. It sounded just like someone in the distance howling, like a coyote. I was starting to get really freaked out by this point, so I hightail it back towards the house. I kept hearing the howling and could swear it was getting closer. I picked up pace and started running towards the edge of the tree line. As soon as I crossed it, the walkie sounded again and there was a cackle. Like, which cackle? I have never ran faster up to the house. Once I was back up, I met up with one of the friends who were seeking and told them about it. Dude and are still out there. They definitively freaked me out. He goes, UHH, they're back here. They said they lost track of you and just came back thinking you already came back. Turns out, they came back but lost the walkie coming back. So, something found the walkie, or I was just hearing things. TLDR. Went into woods with friends and walkie-talkies, which found walkie and fricked with me. I have some other super weird occurrences from when I was a kid, up until about 3 years ago. I think they bamboozled you, man. So I keep having this recurring dream. I live near a field in real life, and in the dream, this is where it mostly takes place. So I'm walking home late at night, specifically 11:49 PM, and I cut across the field to get home quicker. I keep checking my phone and I look up and there's a pure black triangular looking object with a white light on each vertex. Not like a beam of light, it more a torch style light. I walk faster and I hear humming which gets louder and louder. I start running. There's a hole in the fence of the separation from the field in the road which I climb through, and then I fall as I run through. All of a sudden I always cut to 12:03 AM with a cracked screen on the opposite side of the road when I'm walking to my house, and the triangle in the sky is back to the original place in pure silence. I go to bed and wake up like nothing happened. But the reason this dream feels like it really happened is the fact I go to bed and go to sleep in the dream. Now the true experience. One night in July, can't remember an exact date, I was walking through the field and hear some humming coming from behind the trees at the back of the field. I think frick that and walk faster. The time 11:49 PM. I look into the trees and see a bright white light, so I start to panic and drop my phone as I walk through the hole in the fence. I get to the other side of the road where I sit having a panic attack and think that this is exactly the same dream. Once I calm down I check the phone and walk home. It's cracked and it's 12:03 AM. My most X-Files weird as frick moment when my dream came sort of true. My brother was helping me across the country. We borrowed a van and loaded everything up for the last trip. Just before we left I checked my watch and called my GF that we would be hitting the road soon. My brothy checked the kitchen clock but only told me later he did. We set out but couldn't do more than 80 kilometers per hour because of the load. When we took the off-ramp of my new city my brother told me he couldn't remember the trip. When I thought about it, neither could I. We both thought we were tired and thought nothing of it. However, when we arrived at my new house my GF asked if I broke the speed limit because we were almost an hour early. When retracing the route, my brother and I both agreed that we can remember passing a certain gas station and nothing thereafter, until the off-ramp. To this day we have no clue what happened during that hour when missing, or how we could have traveled that fast. Not with any car or van at least. Now at the beginning I wrote we both independently checked for time. This is important for us because one time source could have been wrong but not both. Also I called before we left, which limits the time we could use to travel. Since then we have never experienced any weirdness like it or otherwise. I don't have any weird memories or dreams. No piece of metal lodge under my skin, etc. Just an hour I lost. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.